My mother-in-law called me a racial slur, and I only learned the real reason after I filed for divorce. People usually assume that sentence is the whole story. They hear it and think, okay, terrible mother-in-law, weak husband, obvious ending. And I get why they think that. If someone had told me the short version at a party, I probably would have nodded, said I was sorry, and quietly decided I would have left too. But the thing that still gets me is that I did not leave because she said one horrible thing. I left because one horrible thing finally made everything else visible. The money, the little comments, the way my husband started looking at my work like it belonged to him, the way his mother talked about my properties like she was already picking out curtains. And then, after I filed, I found out that neither of them had been reacting to an argument. They had been reacting to a plan falling apart. I am black. My ex-husband, Daniel, is white. We were together for 5 years before we got married, and for most of those 5 years I genuinely thought we were one of the good couples. Not perfect, obviously. I am suspicious of anyone who says their relationship is perfect because either they are lying or they have never had to assemble furniture together. But we were easy. That was the word I used all the time. Easy. We met through a friend at a backyard cookout when I was 21 and he was 22. He showed up late with store-bought brownies in one of those plastic clamshell containers and spent 10 minutes insisting he had baked them himself until the label fell out of the bag. That was Daniel back then. A little awkward, funny when he was not trying to be funny, kind in these small specific ways that made you feel seen. He remembered I hated cucumber in salad. He would send me pictures of dogs he saw on his walk to work because he knew it would make me smile. When I first told him I wanted to get my real estate license, he did not act like I had announced I was going to become an astronaut. He sat on my apartment floor with me and helped make flashcards. He quizzed me on contracts, disclosures, fair housing rules, all of it. He even brought me coffee the morning I took the exam. So if you are reading this and thinking, how did you not see it? I have asked myself that question enough times for all of us. I saw some things. I just filed them under annoying instead of dangerous. There is a difference, and I was apparently very committed to pretending I knew where that difference was. His family had money in the way some families have a lake house and somehow never talk about money while talking about money constantly. Daniel's dad, Martin, owned a small commercial heating, ventilation, and air conditioning company. His mother, Denise, did not work outside the house, though she referred to running the household like she had been chief executive officer of a Fortune 500 company for 30 years. They lived in a large older house in a nice neighborhood outside our city. It was the kind of house with a formal dining room nobody ate in and towels in the bathroom you were not supposed to use. Martin was quiet and a little stiff at first, but he was always polite to me. Denise was polite too, technically. That word became important later, technically. She would hug me at the door and compliment my dress, then ask whether I had picked it because it was so bold. She would ask how real estate was going in the same tone people use when asking a teenager how their little band is doing. And she had this habit of looking at Daniel whenever I answered a question, like I was a customer service representative and he was the person authorized to make decisions. The first time I noticed it, we were at Sunday dinner maybe 6 months after Daniel and I moved in together. Denise asked whether I planned to keep working once we got married someday. I laughed because we had not even talked seriously about marriage yet. I said, I hope so. I kind of need a job to keep buying groceries. She smiled at Daniel and said, well, a husband should be able to take care of his wife. It is nice that you have hobbies though. I remember waiting for him to say something. Not a speech, nothing dramatic. Just maybe real estate is not a hobby, Mom. Instead, he laughed lightly and changed the subject to a football game. In the car afterward, I told him it had bothered me. He put one hand on the steering wheel and said, she was trying to be nice. She is just old-fashioned. That sentence became a theme in our marriage. She is just old-fashioned. She is just stressed. She did not mean it like that. She gets weird around new people. Do not give her the reaction she wants. It was always my job to understand her better than she understood herself. I worked hard in the first few years. I started as an assistant at a brokerage, scheduling showings, answering phones, doing all the boring things people do not picture when they think about real estate. Then I got licensed. I started with rentals, then small starter homes, then a few renovation listings. I was good at seeing what a place could become without lying to people about what it was. A bad kitchen is still a bad kitchen, but if you can explain how paint, lighting, and a reasonable budget can make it less depressing, people trust you. Eventually, I started doing basic staging and renovation coordination for clients who were too busy or too overwhelmed to handle it themselves. I built relationships with contractors, painters, photographers, inspectors, lenders, everybody. It was not glamorous. It was a lot of standing in empty houses with a tape measure and a granola bar, answering calls from people who had lost cabinet handles or forgotten which wall was load-bearing. But it grew. Daniel worked in information technology support for a regional hospital system. At first he made more than I did, and he was never weird about it. He paid for vacation sometimes. He covered dinner if I had a slow month. I did not depend on him, but I appreciated that he did not make me feel small when I needed help. That was another reason I trusted him. When you have watched men turn a woman needing support into a debt she has to repay forever, kindness can look a lot like safety. We got engaged on a Friday night after takeout. Not at a restaurant, not at a party, not with a photographer hiding in a bush. Just in our apartment kitchen, with pad thai getting cold on the counter. He got down on one knee, looked terrified, and asked me to marry him. I said yes before he finished the question. I was happy, really happy. I called my mother crying. My sister screamed so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. Then we told his parents. Denise's first question was not about the ring or the date. It was whether we were going to have a prenup. She said it while cutting chicken at dinner, like she was asking whether we wanted mashed potatoes. Martin gave her a look. Daniel looked embarrassed. I said I had actually been thinking the same thing because by then my business was becoming real. I had a limited liability company, a small office lease, a business account, and a few investment interests with friends. I was not rich, not even close. But I was building something, and I had watched enough messy divorces through clients to know love does not make paperwork disappear. Denise blinked at me like I had answered in a language she did not expect me to speak. Well, she said, that makes sense for Daniel too. The agreement was done properly. We each had separate attorneys, we each reviewed it. It protected what we had before the marriage and laid out how anything new would be handled. Daniel signed without making a scene. He actually squeezed my hand in the lawyer's office and said, I want you to feel safe with me. I remember feeling so relieved I almost cried. That was one of the cruelest parts later. The things he said were not obviously fake. They were exactly what I needed to hear. The wedding was small, mostly because I did not want to spend the down payment on a house trying to impress people who would complain about the chicken anyway. My family came, his family came. Dina's behaved herself. She even gave a toast about welcoming me into the family. It was vague enough that nobody could accuse her of saying anything wrong, but she kept using the phrase, or way of doing things. I ignored it. I had a white dress, a husband I loved, and a mother who had cried so hard during the ceremony that my aunt had to hand her tissues in batches. For about 6 months after the wedding, everything looked normal. Daniel still worked. I was busy. We kept our finances mostly separate with one joint account for rent, utilities, groceries, and shared savings. We talked about maybe buying a place in a year or two. We had a dog we were not ready for yet but had already named in several conversations. We were one of those couples who spent Sunday mornings scrolling listings and sending each other houses with captions like, absolutely not, why is the bathtub in the bedroom? Then Daniel got laid off. It was not his fault. The hospital system outsourced a department, and a lot of people lost jobs at once. I felt awful for him. He had always worked. He had always been responsible. I encouraged him to take a minute, update his resume, breathe. My business had started having a very good year, so I told him I could carry more of the monthly expenses for a while. He looked relieved. He hugged me. He cried one night quietly when he thought I was asleep. I want to be fair about that part. Losing a job messes with people. It can make them scared and ashamed and unlike themselves. I understand that now. What I do not accept anymore is the idea that fear gives someone permission to turn cruel. Around the same time, I landed 2 larger renovation and sale projects through a developer I had been trying to work with for nearly a year. It was not instant millionaire money. It was not Malibu money. It was simply enough that I could finally breathe without checking every invoice twice. I told Daniel one night after I had finished the numbers for the quarter. I was proud of myself. I expected him to be proud too. At first he was. He whistled when he saw the total and said, babe, we're rich now. I laughed. We are not rich. We are less stressed. There is a difference. He did not laugh back. He leaned against the counter and said, well, maybe I do not need to jump at the first terrible job that comes along. Maybe I can take some time and figure out what I actually want. I told him that was fine. I meant it. I wanted him to find something he liked, not panic apply to another job he hated. Then he said, and mom has been wanting to redo her kitchen for years. Maybe we could finally help her out. I honestly thought I had misunderstood him. Help her out how? Like give her some money. The cabinets are falling apart and dad keeps putting it off. Daniel, your parents own a house. Your dad owns a business. Why would I be paying for their kitchen? His face changed a little. Not angry exactly. More like I had broken a rule I had not been told existed. Because we can afford it now. He said I asked him if he meant we, or if he meant me. He sighed the way he did whenever I made something inconveniently specific. He said I was being defensive. I said I was being clear then. He said, my money has always been mine. You never complained about that. That was true. I had never complained, because I had never assumed his money belonged to me. I told him that was exactly the point. His money was his, mine was mine. The shared account was for us. His mother did not live in the shared account. He did not speak to me for the rest of the night except to ask whether I had seen his charger. I told myself he was embarrassed. I told myself unemployment was making him sensitive. I told myself a lot of things that would later sound ridiculous even to me. Denise started calling more after that. At first she called Daniel. Then she started calling me too. She would ask if I knew a good contractor, then tell me how expensive everything had become. She would send me pictures of her kitchen with circles around the countertop and cabinet doors. One text said, you have such a great eye, honey. I know you would never let family live like this if you could help it. I did not answer that one right away. I showed it to Daniel when he came home from a networking event. He barely looked at it. He said, she is just trying to connect with you through your work. By asking me to renovate her house. By talking about something you understand. I stared at him for a second. Then I asked why she did not connect with him through information technology by asking him to rebuild her computer. He told me I was twisting things. That was new. He had never used that phrase with me before. It sat in my chest like a stone. There were other things too. Denise began dropping by without warning on weekdays. Once she came over at 10 in the morning while I was working from home and let herself in because Daniel had given her a key. She walked through the apartment commenting on the furniture I had bought before we got married. She said she liked that I had kept things simple, because it would make it easier when we bought a real home. Another time, she asked what I planned to do with a small duplex I owned with a former coworker. It was not a secret, but it was not family business either. I told her it was rented. She said, that could be nice for us someday if we needed somewhere temporary. I asked what she meant. She laughed and said, oh, nothing. You know how things change when people get older. Daniel was sitting right there. He did not say a word. That was when I started keeping little notes in my phone. Not because I thought I needed evidence. I just wanted to stop feeling crazy. I wrote down dates and comments. Denise asking whether I had talked to a tax professional about what would happen if Daniel stayed unemployed. Denise saying a wife with a successful business should be grateful to have a husband who lets her shine. Denise asking whether my business account was separate from our household money. Daniel saying it was rude of me to be suspicious of his mother. I even wrote down a dinner where someone mentioned a mutual friend who had cheated on his girlfriend. We were sitting at a restaurant with 2 other couples. The friend was not there. Somebody said he was a disgusting coward. Daniel shrugged and said, "You never know what is going on in someone else's relationship." It was not a terrible thing to say by itself. It could have been thoughtful. But then he added, "Sometimes people do what they have to do to be happy." The table got quiet. I remember looking at him because I had never heard him talk like that. He looked back at me and smiled, but it was not a real smile. It was a tiny warning disguised as one. I should have asked more questions then. I know that, but I was tired. My work was taking off. I was carrying more of our household expenses. I was trying not to make every conversation about his job search. And honestly, I did not want to be the woman who checked her husband's phone because he said one weird thing at dinner. I had spent too long building a life I was proud of to become someone I did not recognize. The first time I learned Daniel had been sending his mother money again was almost by accident. Our joint account had a transfer labeled something generic, and I assumed it was rent until I checked the amount. It was $3,000. I asked him about it that night. He said it was a loan. For what? Mom had something come up. What thing? He rubbed his forehead. Why does it matter? I will replace it. It matters because it came from the account we use for bills and savings. You can replace it too. You are doing fine. That was the first time I felt something in me go very cold. Not angry, not even sad, just cold. I asked him whether he would have moved money from the account if I had been the one unemployed. He did not answer. I asked again. He said I was making him feel like a failure, and there it was. Every time I tried to talk about what he had done, the conversation became about how hard it was for him to hear it. He paid the money back a week later after I told him I would close the joint account if he did not. But then Denise called me crying about a roof leak. She said Martin was dealing with a complicated job and they were stretched thin. I told her I was sorry, but I was not in a position to fund repairs. She went very quiet. Then she said, "I thought you understood that family helps family." I said, "Family also ask before spending someone else's money." She hung up on me. After that, the pressure got worse. Denise asked whether I could help her organize insurance paperwork. She asked whether I could find a cheaper contractor. She asked whether I could let her use one of my business credit cards because she had a points offer on appliances. Daniel kept telling me she was overwhelmed. He said she had spent her whole life taking care of people and did not know how to ask for help properly. I pointed out that she seemed perfectly capable of asking for help. She was just very selective about whom she expected to provide it. One Sunday, she came over with a folder, a literal folder. It had paint swatches, appliance printouts, and a proposal from a contractor who had apparently already visited the house. She set it on our dining table and started explaining what the kitchen could look like. I asked why she was showing me this. She looked confused. Because Daniel said you would want to be involved. I turned to him. He had the decency to look uncomfortable, at least. He said he had told her I was good at this stuff and maybe I could help make sure she was not overcharged. That is not what she thinks you told her, I said. Denise crossed her arms. Nobody is asking you to write a blank check. You asked me for my credit card last week. I was asking because you have resources. There is nothing wrong with using the resources in a marriage. I said, "You mean my resources?" Daniel stood up so suddenly his chair scraped the floor. He told me I was embarrassing him. In my own apartment, at my own table, over a folder his mother had brought into my home to plan a renovation I had never agreed to fund. That night I slept in the guest room. He did not come check on me. At about 2 in the morning, I heard him in the living room talking on the phone. I could not make out everything, but I heard him say, "She is being impossible right now," and then, "No, I know what I told you. Just give me a little time." I lay there staring at the ceiling, thinking about how strange it was that a marriage could feel normal from the outside while something inside it was quietly rotting. The actual day I heard Denise say the slur was a Thursday. I know that because I had a closing scheduled for the next morning, and I remember thinking I needed to get home early to review documents. A client canceled a walkthrough, so I got back to the apartment about an hour earlier than Daniel expected. His car was in the lot. Denise's was too. I did not think much of it at first. I was annoyed because she had not texted, but that was becoming normal. I unlocked the door quietly because I had bags in both hands. Then I heard voices from the living room. Denise was saying, "I do not know why you ever let yourself get tied down to her. She thinks because she makes a little money, she gets to control everyone." Daniel said something I could not hear. Then she said the word. The slur, she used it like she had used it before, not hesitating, not testing the room, just casually, with the confidence of someone who believed she was among people who agreed with her. There was a second of silence. My whole body went hot. I could hear the refrigerator humming. I could hear the little ticking noise the clock in our kitchen made when it was quiet. And then Daniel said, "Mom, you cannot say that." For half a second, I almost felt relief. Then he added, "Some of them are selfish, but not all of them." I do not know if I have ever felt a room disappear around me the way that one did. It was not just that he had failed to defend me. He had made room inside her racism for himself. He had corrected the wording while agreeing with the idea. I put my bags down in the hallway. They both looked up when I walked in. Denise's face changed first. Daniel's went completely pale. He stood. "Babe," I said, "do not call me that right now." Denise started talking immediately. She said she had been upset. She said I had misunderstood. She said I had been disrespectful to her for months and anybody would snap. It was honestly almost impressive how quickly she made herself the victim. I looked at Daniel. I asked him if he agreed with what she said. He kept saying, "It is not that simple." I asked again. He said, "You have been acting like you are better than us because of money." That was it. Not the whole end of the marriage, obviously, but the end of the part where I still believed there was a misunderstanding hiding underneath everything. I told him I wanted a divorce. I did not yell. I did not throw anything. I think that made Danae angrier. She wanted a scene. She wanted me to look unstable and emotional and exactly like whatever story she had already built about me in her head. Instead, I went upstairs, packed a suitcase, took my laptop, my passport, my work files, and the folder where I kept our prenup, then I left. The place I went was a small townhouse I had bought 2 years earlier with a former client as a rental investment. My share was mine. It was not some secret mansion or a dramatic bunker. It was a quiet 2-bedroom place across town that had just become vacant between tenants. Daniel knew I had investments, but he did not know that one was empty. I had never hidden it. He had simply never paid attention when the information was not about him. He called me 12 times that night. I did not answer. He texted, "Please let me explain." Then, "Mom is sorry." Then, "You cannot blow up our marriage over one conversation." Then, finally, "You know I need you right now." That last one did something to me. Not because it was romantic, because it was honest. The next morning, I called my attorney, the same woman who had handled the prenup. I told her what happened. She did not tell me what decision to make. She asked whether I felt safe. She asked whether I had access to my accounts. She asked whether there were shared credit cards or debt I needed to monitor. Then she told me to document everything and not sign anything Daniel put in front of me. By noon, I discovered he had moved almost everything out of our joint household account, not my business account. He could not touch that, not my investments. But the money we used for rent, utilities, and the emergency fund was nearly gone. He had not taken enough to make him rich. He had taken enough to make a point. I called him once. He answered immediately. I asked where the money was. He said, "I needed it." For what? I am figuring things out. "Did you give it to your mother?" He did not answer fast enough. I said, "Daniel, did you give our money to your mother?" He said, "It is still in the family." I hung up. There are sentences that tell you everything you need to know about a person. That was one of them. His relatives started calling after that. His aunt told me Denise had been under a lot of pressure. His cousin told me I was making a big decision based on a misunderstanding. One of his uncles said marriage was about forgiveness. I asked him if he would have said the same thing if Daniel had been called a racial slur by my mother. He got quiet, then said that was different. Of course it was different. It was always different when it was happening to me. The one person who surprised me was Martin. He called from his office late that afternoon. He sounded older than I remembered. He said he had heard enough from Daniel to know Denise had said something unforgivable. He said he did not blame me for leaving. He offered to connect me with a divorce attorney his company used, then immediately added that he did not expect me to trust him and understood if I wanted no involvement with the family. I told him I already had counsel. He said okay. Then he said quietly, "For what it is worth, I do not think Daniel understands what he has done." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because I had spent years hearing that same defense in different forms. He does not understand. He is stressed. He is trying. He is caught in the middle. I told Martin, "Hey, understood enough to move money." He did not argue. I filed for divorce the following Monday. It felt unreal. I had imagined divorce as something people did after years of screaming and counseling and dramatic final betrayals. Mine started with a form, a lawyer's office, and a woman asking me to confirm the spelling of my married name. Daniel asked to meet 2 days later. He said he wanted a chance to apologize in person. Against my lawyer's advice, I agreed to one meeting at a restaurant near the courthouse. I do not know why. Maybe I needed to see his face and make sure I was not making it all up. Maybe some part of me still wanted him to say the one thing that would turn the whole mess back into the man I thought I married. He brought Denise. I almost left when I saw her walk in, but Daniel looked so anxious that I sat down. I told myself I'd leave at any time. I ordered iced tea. Denise ordered wine before the server had even finished saying hello. Daniel apologized first. He said he had been ashamed about losing his job. He said he felt useless next to me. He said Denise had gotten in his head. He said he never meant to hurt me. He said he loved me. I asked why he took money from our joint account. He said he planned to put it back. I asked why he told his mother I would pay for her kitchen. He said he had hoped I would eventually see it as helping family. I asked why he let her use that word about me. He looked down at the table. I did not let her. You answered her. I was trying to calm her down. You agreed with her. He did not answer. Then Denise cleared her throat and said she wanted to apologize too. She said she had been raised differently. She said she had not meant it the way it sounded. She said she had watched her son struggling and felt scared I was going to leave him behind now that I did not need him financially. For one stupid second, I almost felt sorry for her. Then she asked whether I had thought any more about helping with the house. I stared at her. She kept going. She said she knew it was not a good time, but the contractor was waiting and the roof situation was becoming urgent. She said an apology should mean we could move forward, not punish her forever. Daniel sat there like he had forgotten how to speak. I said, "You are asking me for money while I am meeting you because you called me a slur." Deniz's face tightened. "I am asking you to think about the family you married into. I am filing for divorce." That was when she finally stopped pretending. She called me selfish. Then she said women like me always thought success meant we did not owe anybody anything. I told her I did not owe her a kitchen. She said I had already taken enough from Daniel by making him feel small. I asked what exactly I had taken from him. And then she said it. "I am glad he cheated on you," she said. "At least somebody made him feel wanted. And do not think you get to keep everything. We We will get what we are owed when this divorce is over. The restaurant did that thing restaurants do after someone says something awful, where everybody nearby suddenly becomes extremely interested in their menu. I looked at Daniel. He would not look at me. I asked him if it was true. He said, it was not serious. I asked him if he had cheated on me. He said nothing. That was answer enough. I pay for my tea and left. I did not slap anyone. I did not tip over a table. I did not give Denise the reaction she wanted. I walked out, got into my car, drove 3 blocks, and then pulled into a pharmacy parking lot because my hands were shaking too badly to keep driving. I sat there for maybe 40 minutes. I cried. Then I called my lawyer and told her I did not want another meeting without attorneys present. The strange part is that even after Denise said it, I still did not know the whole truth. I knew Daniel had cheated. I knew his mother knew. I knew they wanted money, but I did not know why she had been so furious that day in our living room. Not just angry. Panicked, like I had ruined something that was already supposed to happen. I found out a little over a week later. The call came from a number I did not recognize. The man on the other end introduced himself as Aaron. He said he was engaged to a woman named Kelsey, who worked with Daniel. I knew the name. Daniel had mentioned her before. Usually in the vague way people mention coworkers they do not want you asking follow-up questions about. Aaron sounded exhausted. He said he had found messages. He said he was not calling to be cruel. He thought I deserved to know because he had learned that Daniel and Kelsey had been involved for months. I told him I already knew Daniel had cheated. He was quiet for a second. Then he said, I do not think you know all of it. He sent me screenshot. There were hotel receipts, messages about meeting after work, pictures I did not need to see but saw anyway. There were conversations where Daniel complained that I was always busy and made him feel like an employee in my own life. There were messages where Kelsey asked whether he was going to leave me. He told her it was complicated because I was the one with money. That hurt in its own special way. Not because I cared what Kelsey thought of me. I did not know her. But because Daniel had turned my work, the thing I had built while trying to support him, into an excuse for betraying me. Then Aaron sent a voice memo Kelsey had forwarded to him by accident. It was from a group chat. You could hear Daniel and Denise talking in the background, probably on speakerphone while Kelsey was there. The recording was not clear enough to be evidence for a courtroom, but it was clear enough for me. Denise said, you told me she would help once the commission came in. Daniel said, she will. She just needs to calm down. Denise said, and if she leaves? There was a pause. Then Daniel said, she will not leave over one fight. She knows what she would lose. Denise laughed. She said, if she does, everyone will know she threw away a marriage because she could not handle being corrected. And you can get support. You have been out of work. Daniel said, Mom, do not say it like that. She said, I am saying you deserve a life too. You deserve a home that feels like yours. Then Kelsey, very faintly, said something I could not make out. Daniel laughed. Denise said, that girl can wait. Get this settled first. I listened to it 3 times, not because I enjoyed hurting myself, because I needed my brain to catch up with what I was hearing. The first time, I heard the obvious things. His mother talking about my money like it had already been deposited into her account. Daniel sounding tired but not surprised. The fact that Kelsey was there, close enough to hear them, while he was apparently telling both of us completely different versions of his life. The second time, I heard the pauses. Daniel did not push back when Denise talked about me leaving first. He did not say I would never ask her for support. He did not say, Mom, that is not how divorce works. He only told her not to say it like that. Same pattern, different room, different day. He had always been more upset by the words his mother used than by what she meant. The third time, I heard myself in it. Not literally, but I could hear every time I had smiled through one of Denise's comments because Daniel said it would be easier. Every time I had paid the bigger grocery bill without keeping score because marriage was not supposed to be keeping score. Every time I had told myself that being understanding made me a better wife. They had turned all of that into evidence that I would stay. That was the part that made me put my phone down and sit on the floor of the townhouse for a while. I was not furious in some cinematic way. I did not feel powerful. I felt embarrassed, which is a miserable feeling after betrayal because it makes you angry at yourself for trusting someone who was supposed to be trustworthy. I kept thinking about him helping me study for my license. Him bringing coffee before my exam, him holding my hand while we signed the prenup. I wondered how many of those moments had been real. Then I realized that was not actually the question. Some of them probably had been real to him at the time. People can love you and still be selfish. People can mean a kind thing one year and do a cruel thing the next. The problem was not that every good memory was fake. The problem was that I had been using the good memories as excuses to ignore what was happening in the present. My lawyer listened to the recording without interrupting. When it ended, she did not tell me I was lucky or strong or better off. She said, this explains the behavior, but you do not need an explanation to leave. I wrote that down. I still have it in an old notes app somewhere. At the time, I needed permission not to turn every ugly detail into a courtroom exhibit before I could believe I was allowed to be done. The screenshots mattered. The money mattered. The agreement mattered. But I did not have to prove to every person in Daniel's family that I had suffered enough before I chose myself. They had expected me to stay. That was the real reason Denise had been so angry. She was not just offended that I refused to pay for cabinets. She had already made plans around my money. Daniel had promised her I would come around. He had promised Kelsey he would eventually leave me. He had apparently told both of them whatever version of the future made them stay useful to him. And when I walked in and heard what Denise said, I did the one thing neither of them had prepared for. I left first. I sent the recording and screenshots to my lawyer. I did not post them online. I did not send them to every person Daniel knew. Believe me, the thought crossed my mind. But I wanted the divorce clean. I wanted out. I did not need to become their version of me just to prove I had been right. The divorce moved faster after that, not because life is like television, but because Daniel stopped pretending he could keep everyone happy. His attorney reviewed the prenup. The agreement was solid. His mother could believe whatever she wanted about spousal support, but belief does not rewrite a contract. My business remained mine. My investment properties remained mine. The money he had pulled from our joint account became part of the settlement conversation, and he had to account for it. Denise kept calling for a while. She left voicemails saying I had ruined Daniel's future. She said I had turned Martin against her. She said I was vindictive. Once she said she hoped I was proud of what I had done to a family that had welcomed me. I blocked her after that. Martin and I spoke only once more. He called to say he had found out Denise had been telling people he would cover the kitchen himself, then asking Daniel for cash behind his back. Apparently the roof leak had been exaggerated too. There was a repair needed, but not the emergency she described. She had already ordered appliances and put down deposits because she believed Daniel when he told her my next project check was essentially family money. When I refused and then filed, the whole thing collapsed. Daniel could not replace what he had taken. Martin refused to keep bailing them out. Denise had bills she had ignored while waiting for someone else to rescue her. The contractor wanted payment. The mortgage was behind, and the house she had wanted to transform into some magazine kitchen became a house she could not afford to keep. I wish I could tell you I felt mature and sad about that. I did not. I felt petty. I felt hurt. I felt like somebody had handed me but unlabeled do nothing and watch consequences happen. The house went up for sale a few months later. My business partner sent me the listing as a joke. She knew the history, at least the version I had told her. The photos were awful. Denise had started tearing out parts of the kitchen before she had money to finish it, so there were exposed walls and mismatched cabinets. The listing price was lower than it should have been because whoever bought it would need to put real work into it. I stared at that listing for 2 days. Then I bought the house. Yes, I know how that sounds. I know, but I was in real estate. I knew what the house was worth. I knew the neighborhood. I knew exactly what the repairs would cost because Denise had made me look at every single proposal. It was not some magical purchase made with a credit card and spate. It was an investment, and also, if I am being completely honest, a little bit of spite. I did not move into it. I renovated it properly, rented it out, and made sure the kitchen had cabinets Denise would probably have loved. That part made me laugh harder than it should have. Daniel found out through someone in his family. He called me after months of silence. I almost did not answer, but curiosity is not always a healthy trait. He said, "You bought my parents' house." I said, "I bought a property that was for sale." He said, "That is cruel." I asked him if telling his mother I would fund her renovation without asking me had been kind. I asked whether taking money from our account had been kind. I asked whether cheating on me while letting his mother call me a slur had been kind. He said he knew he had messed up. I said, "You did not mess up. You made decisions. A lot of them." Then I hung up. The Malibu part happened about a year later. And before anyone starts, yes, I know it sounds ridiculous. I did not wake up one morning, walk into a Malibu house store, and pick one off a shelf. My business had grown. I had taken on a partner. We had sold 2 investments at a profit, including the house Denise used to own after the renovation. And I had always wanted a place near the water, even if I never expected it to be there. Daniel had talked about Malibu for years, not because he had a plan to get there. He just liked looking at listings and saying, one day. There was one small modern house he used to send me whenever it came back on the market. He liked the windows and the view and the way the kitchen opened into the living room. He would say we could have dinner parties there, even though we barely had people over in our apartment. After the divorce, I started taking little trips by myself. At first it was just weekends, a hotel somewhere with a pool, a town with good coffee and nobody who knew me. Then I spent a week in Southern California for a work conference. I drove up the coast one afternoon, mostly because I had nowhere else to be. I saw that house again. Not exactly the same listing, not exactly the same price, but the same street and the same stupid beautiful windows. I went to the open house on a whim. I stood in the kitchen and thought about how strange it was that Daniel had spent years imagining a future in a place like that while he was willing to throw away an actual marriage for a fantasy involving somebody else's money. I did not buy it that day. I went home, ran numbers, talked to my partner, talked to my accountant, and sat with the decision for months. Eventually, I did buy a house in Malibu. It was not to hurt him, not entirely. It was because I could, because I wanted it, and because I had spent too much of my life making choices around what would make other people comfortable with my success. My family came for Christmas that year. My mom brought enough food for a small army. My sister made everyone take pictures on the deck. My niece ran through the house in socks and almost knocked over a lamp. We ate takeout the first night because nobody felt like cooking, and I sat on the floor in my own kitchen with a paper plate in my lap, laughing so hard at something my uncle said that I cried. It was not the kind of happy I thought marriage was supposed to give me. It was quieter than that, cleaner. Nobody was watching my plate, my bank account, my clothes, my choices. Nobody was waiting for me to prove I deserved what I had. I heard later that Daniel was living with his brother for a while. I heard Kelsey did not stay with him. I heard Denise blamed me for all of it. Maybe she still does. I honestly do not know because I blocked every number connected to that family and stopped asking people for updates. Sometimes I still think about the first time Denise called my career a hobby. Or the way Daniel signed the prenup so easily, like protecting me was the same thing as respecting me. Or the night at that restaurant when he said some people do what they have to do be happy. I think about all the little moments I dismissed because they were easier to live with than the larger truth. The larger truth was that Daniel did not want a partner. He wanted a safety net with a credit score. Denise did not want a daughter-in-law. She wanted somebody she could shame into funding the life she thought her son deserved. And I was not divorced because his mother said a word. I was divorced because he heard that word, understood it, and still thought the bigger problem was that I might stop paying for things. That is the part I learned after I filed. The real reason she was so angry was not that I had disrespected her. It was that I had finally refused to be useful to her.